The light from Kaelen's battery lamp cast long, wavering shadows across the makeshift lab. Dust motes danced in the anemic beam, catching the faint, stale scent of old paper and chemicals. His breath plumed in the cold air. The house was a tomb of silence, broken only by the shallow, rhythmic rise and fall of breathing from the next room. His family slept. They had slept for months. He hunched over a dissection tray, his gaunt frame a tight coil of tension. His bloodshot eyes, rimmed with purple, were fixed on the delicate tissue. A scalpel, thin and gleaming, rested in his hand. He moved with a practiced, almost ritualistic precision, his fingers steady despite the tremor that often ran through his body. A small, gray rat brain lay exposed. He worked on it, searching, always searching. The hum of the lamp was a low, constant drone, a fragile anchor in the oppressive quiet. He leaned closer, the faint metallic tang of formaldehyde tickling his nostrils. Each cut was deliberate, each layer peeled back with the care of a surgeon, the desperation of a man running out of time. He needed answers. The sickness had taken them. It had stolen their waking world, leaving only this profound, terrifying stillness. His gaze flickered to the shelf above the cluttered workbench. Empty vials stood like sentinels. A few half-used bottles of reagents, their labels faded, held only a finger's worth of liquid, the last of the sterile saline. His stomach twisted. He picked up a small bottle of glutaraldehyde, tilting it. A few drops clung to the bottom, not enough for another proper tissue fixation, not enough for anything. The realization settled, cold and heavy. The supplies were gone, the scavenged remnants of a forgotten hospital wing, the desperate raids on a deserted university lab, they had all yielded their last. He had used them piece by precious piece on a dozen rats. On 100 failed experiments, each one brought him no closer. Each one a step further into the silent, waking nightmare. He pushed back from the table, the old chair scraping against the floorboards, a jarring sound in the quiet. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the rough stubble, the sharp angles of his cheekbones. His fingers brushed his eyes, raw and aching. The stillness of the house pressed in, a physical weight. He could hear them, his mother, his father, Juno, their soft, even breaths, a constant reminder of his failure. He turned his head, his gaze drawn to the doorway leading to the living room. He knew what lay beyond. Seraphina, peaceful in her bed, a clean sheet drawn high. Marius, a solid presence even in his slumber. Juno, frozen in her youth. Their faces, serene and unlined, were a stark contrast to the frantic energy that pulsed through his own veins. He was a storm in a still world, the last of the antibiotics, the last of the culture media, the last of the glucose solutions. He had nothing left to work with, nothing left to keep the hope alive. The rat brain, still exposed on the tray, offered no new secrets. It was a dead end. He had to go out. The thought was a cold knot in his gut. The outside world, a place of unknown dangers, of silence even deeper than this house. But he had no choice. The city exhaled a silence that pressed in on Kaelen. It was a silence filled with the whisper of wind through broken panes, the distant creak of unseen structures settling into ruin. He moved through it, a ghost among ghosts, his worn boots crunching on shattered glass and fine grit that coated everything. The sun, a pale disk in a perpetually hazy sky, offered little warmth. His eyes, perpetually bloodshot, scanned the skeletal remains of storefronts. The vacant stare of apartment blocks, every shadow held a potential threat. Every abandoned vehicle, rusted and hulking, was a blind spot. A faded utility jacket pulled tight across his gaunt frame offered scant protection against the chill that seeped into his bones. He was tired, the kind of tired that gnawed at the marrow, but the thought of his family, sleeping their silent, terrible sleep, was a constant, sharp spur. The backpack shifted on his shoulder, the scavenged contents rattling softly. A heavy-duty pry bar, scarred and functional, hung from a side strap. It was a tool. It was a weapon. It was all he had. He needed chemicals, rare reagents, sterile equipment, high-capacity batteries, and any neurological research papers, anything at all that might offer a new path. The university medical complex, a brutalist monolith, loomed in the distance, a dark promise on the horizon. He fixed his gaze on it, pulling it closer with sheer will. He moved down a street choked with overturned buses and cars fused together by rust. Weeds, tenacious and green, pushed through the buckling asphalt. A faint, metallic tang hung in the air, a scent of decay and stagnation. He kept to the shadows, hugging the walls of buildings, his movements economical, a driven restlessness in every muscle. His breath came in shallow, controlled bursts, a flicker of movement, not the wind. He flattened himself against a crumbling brick wall, pressing into the rough surface. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He held his breath, listening. The silence stretched, then broke. The faint scuff of boots on concrete, not his own. 3 figures emerged from the skeletal remains of a collapsed hardware store, moving with a predatory caution. Gaunt, unwashed, their clothes a mismatched patchwork. their eyes darted, wary, hungry. One carried a length of rebar sharpened to a cruel point, another a heavy pipe, the third a hunting knife glinted at his hip. They moved like a pack, their movements synchronized, silent. They were searching for anything, for anyone. Kaelen pressed himself tighter into the shadow, becoming part of the wall. He could smell them now, stale sweat, unwashed clothes, the sharp tang of desperation. They were mid to late 20s, 30s, hardened. He watched them, calculating. They were sweeping the street, moving towards his position. His mind raced, a frantic inventory of escape routes. The alley to his left was a dead end. The street ahead was open, too exposed. He waited. His muscles screamed with the effort of stillness. The air grew thick, heavy with their presence. Their voices, low and guttural, carried on the wind indistinguishable words. They were close, too close. He could see the suspicion etched on their faces, the hunger in their eyes. They paused. One of them turning his head slowly, scanning the very wall Kaelen clung to. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down Kaelen's temple. He did not breathe. The man's gaze lingered, then moved on. A small, ragged sigh escaped Kaelen's lips, silent. The group continued their sweep, moving past his hiding spot, their backs to him now. This was his chance. He moved, slow, deliberate, each step a whisper. He eased away from the wall, his boots finding purchase on the gritty pavement. He kept low, using the abandoned vehicles as cover, a broken-down delivery van, then the rusted shell of a sedan. He moved parallel to the group, but putting distance between them, deeper into the urban decay. His pace quickened, a silent, desperate sprint. He did not look back. The metallic tang of fear mixed with the dust in his mouth. He pushed through another block, then two, the encounter fueling the desperate urgency that already burned within him. The city blurred into a gray tableau of decay. He ignored the burning in his lungs, the ache in his legs. His mind, even now, catalogued the supplies, asterisk potassium permanganate, sterile syringes, lithium-ion packs. Asterisk his family's faces, pale and still in their sleep, flashed behind his eyes. The university medical complex grew larger, its brutalist angles dominating the skyline. It was a sprawling structure, formidable. Shattered windows stared out like empty eyes, but the main structure seemed largely intact. Rusted gates, bent and twisted, guarded the main entrance. He approached the perimeter, his eyes scanning for a way in. A service entrance, perhaps, a broken wall, anything. He found it, a section of the chain-link fence twisted back from its concrete post. It was a crude opening, barely wide enough, but it was there. He paused, one last look back at the desolate streets, the silent city. Then slipped through the gap. The chain link scraped against the concrete post. Kaelen slipped through the gap, the metal link snagging his utility jacket. He pulled free, stepping on overgrown asphalt. The air here was different, heavier, stiller. He moved deeper into the university grounds, past silent, manicured lawns choked with weeds, towards the medical complex. It loomed, a brutalist monument to a world that had ceased to be. He found a service entrance, a steel door slightly ajar. Its paint peeling, he pushed it open. The darkness inside swallowed the faint light of dusk. He pulled his headlamp from his pack, flicked it on. A sputtering beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a narrow corridor. The air hung stale, thick with dust and the faint scent of antiseptic long gone. Overturned bins, scattered files, a discarded gurney lay like forgotten corpses. He moved, his boots crunching on grit and broken glass. The silence was profound. Broken only by his own cautious breathing, the soft scrape of his boots. Emergency lights, long dead, lined the walls, their covers cracked. He moved from one corridor to the next, a labyrinth of shadows. His light danced over abandoned offices, examination rooms stripped bare, their equipment scavenged or broken. Dried bloodstains, dark and ancient, marred a wall near an empty triage station. Kaelen stared at the monitor. The green line, a faint tremor moments before, had spiked, a single powerful pulse from a dead brain. The words hung in the stale air. His own breath caught, a ragged thing in his chest. Hope, a cold, sharp blade twisted in his gut. That's impossible. Kaelen's voice was a rasp. Eris pulled her glasses down her nose, her eyes, magnified and sharp, fixed on the screen. Impossible is a luxury we can no longer afford. It happened. My equipment recorded it. She tapped a finger on the monitor, tracing the fading echo of the pulse. But a single reading from post-mortem tissue isn't enough. We need real-time data, live subjects. Kaelen's head snapped up. My family. Eris met his gaze, her expression unreadable. They're still here in the ward. We can't move them without power, without life support. No, Kaelen said, his voice tight with urgency. We need to connect the main systems, the EEG, the imaging console, get a full picture, not just a tissue sample. He swept a hand around the vast, silent lab. This is it. This is our chance. Eris looked from the monitor to the dormant machinery, then back to Kaelen. A long moment passed. The generator hummed, a low, steady thrum against the profound silence of the abandoned hospital. It will take time, Aris said, and power more than this generator can sustain alone. We'll need to reroute what we have, prioritize. We do it, Kaelen insisted, his eyes burned with a desperate fire. Now, they moved, a silent, driven pact. Kaelen, fueled by a manic energy, attacked the task with a restless urgency. He pulled up rusted floor panels, revealing a snaking tangle of power conduits. Dust, thick and ancient, puffed into the air with every movement, catching the weak light from the generator. He traced wires. His fingers nimble despite their grime, connecting them to the jury-rigged power distribution unit Aris had already established. The air thickened with the faint smell of ozone, the tang of old metal, and the dry, dead scent of disuse. Aris worked with methodical precision. She wiped down the dust-laden consoles, her movements economical. She checked connections, her wire-rimmed glasses glinting as she peered at circuit boards. She spoke in low, concise instructions. This one to the main power relay. We bypassed the secondary circuits. Minimal power draw. Kaelen grunted, wrestling with a thick, insulated cable. His muscles ached, but the exhaustion was a distant hum beneath the surge of adrenaline. He saw the flickering fluorescent lights overhead, casting long, dancing shadows that made the sterile-turned grimy environment feel both promising and foreboding. The silence of the abandoned building was occasionally punctuated by the whine of the generator, now straining under the increased load, or the soft clicks and whirs of the diagnostic machines as Aris coaxed them to life. A bank of monitors on the main console flickered, then glowed with a faint, greenish light. A low hum, deeper than the generator's thrum, resonated from the large, multi-channel EEG machine. Kaelen felt a surge of triumph, cold and sharp. Power. Aris stated, her voice quiet, minimal, but enough to begin. She moved to the brain imaging console, its dark screen now showing a faint, pixelated grid. We need a subject. Kaelen nodded. He knew they had discussed it. A few of the sleepers were still in the ward, kept alive by the desperate, dwindling efforts of the last medical staff before they too succumbed. He had seen them lying still like statues carved from flesh. They moved to a small, isolated room off the main lab. A single bed occupied the center, a figure beneath a thin, gray blanket. A young woman, her face pale, her breathing shallow and even. A faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. Aris began the careful process of attaching the electrodes. Kaelen watched, his hands clenched. Each wire, each delicate placement felt like a step towards salvation or towards a deeper abyss. The wires snaked from the woman's head. Across the floor, back to the humming EEG machine. Back in the lab, Aris sat before the console, her fingers poised over the keyboard. Kaelen stood beside her, his breath held tight. The screen, previously blank, now showed a series of jagged green lines, brainwaves, the faint, rhythmic pulse of a sleeping mind. Baseline, Aris murmured, her eyes scanning the data. Typical for this state, low frequency, disorganized. They watched, minutes stretched into an eternity. Kaelen felt the familiar despair begin to creep in, a cold tendril around his heart. Just background noise, just the slow, dying flicker of a brain. Then it happened. One of the green lines, previously a gentle ripple, suddenly tightened. It didn't spike erratically like the postmortem sample. Instead, it formed a distinct, repeating pattern. A series of sharp, precise peaks and troughs, almost too regular. It was a rhythm, too organized, too active for a comatose brain. It pulsed, a steady, undeniable beat, then faded, only to reappear on another channel. A cascade. Kaelen leaned closer, his eyes fixed on the screen. "What is that?" His voice was a whisper. Aris's head tilted, her brow furrowed. She adjusted a dial, zooming in on the anomaly. The pattern sharpened, clearer now. It wasn't random, it was a sequence. A rapid, repeating burst of electrical activity, followed by a brief lull, then another burst. It moved across the brain regions. A wave of directed energy. "It's a frequency," Aris said, her voice low, filled with a dawning awe. "A very specific frequency, and it's not localized, it's propagating, moving through the neural networks." She traced the pattern with a finger. "It's too coherent, too structured. It's not a dying brain, it's something else." Kaelen felt a cold dread seep into his bones, replacing the fragile hope. This wasn't a sign of waking. This was something deeper, something profound. The patterns on the screen were not the random firings of a comatose mind. They were a language, a code, a signal.